a little shy of 20 minutes past 7 Central African time. We take a look at this story now. French energy giant TotalEnergies is facing serious allegations of complicity in war crimes linked to a 2021 massacre near its multi-billion-dollar gas project in northern Mozambique. A complaint filed by the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, or ECCHR, accuses the company of enabling abuses by Mozambican security forces who allegedly tortured and executed civilians near the Afungi gas site. TotalEnergies denies any responsibility for the actions of government troops deployed to protect the project. And joining us now to further discuss this is Chloé Bailey, who is Senior Legal Advisor for Business and Human Rights at the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights. Chloé, good morning to you. Thanks for making time.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the invite to come and speak to you.
So what was the starting point then in terms of what prompted the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, or ECCHR, to launch this investigation?
So our complaint is based on allegations that were reported over a year ago by Politico and Le Monde. And as you said, these investigations uncovered these atrocities that were allegedly committed against civilians. So following these revelations, the Mozambican authorities actually announced an investigation earlier this year. This has been accompanied by investigations by the Netherlands and the UK government that have provided finance to the LNG project. However, from our perspective, there has been no European judicial investigation into the role of TotalEnergies in particular. So that's why we filed this complaint.
What supports or what evidence supports your claim that the company was complicit when it comes to the war crimes?
So, as I said, the complaint is based on publicly available information. So, those two reports published last year. Then also what we have obtained is information about the relationship between TotalEnergies and the Mozambican government. Excuse me. So from 2020 until 2023, Total provided direct material and financial support to the Joint Task Force, which is a security force comprised of members of the Mozambican army. And this task force had the direct responsibility of providing security for the LNG facility. And it's members of this JTF that are alleged to have been involved in these atrocities committed against civilians. And then we have seen from internal company documents that TotalEnergies was actually aware that the Mozambican security forces had been accused of systematic human rights violations before the events at the containers, the events that form the basis of our complaint took place. And there are multiple instances where the company was alerted about these abuses, but despite this knowledge, it continued its financial support.
How directly do you believe TotalEnergies' operations enabled the abuses by Mozambican forces? I know you mentioned there in terms of their funding of the forces, but also how much power did TotalEnergies actually have in what seems like a governance or political issue?
Yeah, so if we look under French law, which, given that this complaint has been filed in France, that's the most, obviously that's the law that we need to apply. It's sufficient to show for complicity that an accomplice to a crime had knowledge that the principal actor, so here the Joint Task Force or the Mozambican security forces, had committed or is about to commit a crime, and that with its aid or assistance, it facilitated the preparation or the commission of that crime. So, from our perspective, providing support to the Joint Task Force, so this included providing food, providing accommodation, also providing bonuses for soldiers. This establishes a sufficient link between Total and the alleged crimes. And I think what's really important to mention that an independent report that was commissioned by Total a few years ago identified the financial link between the company and the Joint Task Force as potentially giving rise to legal responsibility when human rights violations occurred. And obviously, the really severe human rights violations occurred at its LNG facility. So that's the basis for why we are filing this complaint.
So, what is the outcome then that the ECCHR is seeking from French prosecutors through this case?
So, with this complaint, we are requesting that the French Specialized Prosecutor for War Crimes opens a preliminary investigation into the potential complicity of TotalEnergies. And then during the investigation, it's for the prosecutor to determine which actors might be implicated in the alleged crimes and then potentially to issue an indictment.
What's the response been so far as that's concerned? We know that also on the side of TotalEnergies, they've denied any responsibility.
Yes, I mean that's unsurprising, and Total, when the allegations were first revealed last year, that was the response from TotalEnergies. I think we now just have to wait to see what the prosecutor does with the information that we have provided.
Failure to that, do you have a next avenue that you will seek?
At this stage, this is the primary thing that we are focusing on, at least with this case. But I think what is important to look at as well is the role of financial actors. So the financial actors, whether that's export credit agencies in the United Kingdom or the Netherlands, or also private banks that have been providing financial support for the project up until now. I think it's really they should reflect on whether this project is something that they should continue to support.
Right, and on that, funders reflecting, how do you think this case should shape corporate accountability, especially when it comes to conflict zones globally?
So I think this case is really emblematic of the fact that companies operating in conflict zones, they're not neutral actors. So through their actions, they may contribute to the commission of grave human rights violations or indeed violations of international humanitarian law. And I think it's important to frame this case against the backdrop of other numerous examples of multinational companies that have been linked to crimes committed by security forces in conflict zones. And this is something that has occurred in the extractive industry in particular. But what I think the difference now is that slowly European courts are starting to recognize that when these are European companies or executives of these companies, they may be held legally responsible for these crimes. And an example of this, a case that is obviously much further along than ours, is the London case in Sweden, where a trial is currently taking place against two former executives of a Swedish oil company for complicity in war crimes committed by the government in Sudan between 1999 and 2003. And I think these cases, even though currently they're still relatively rare, they should be seen as a wake-up call for companies to show that they can really no longer operate in conflict zones with impunity.
All right, Chloe, we'll leave it there, and thank you for enlightening us on this very important matter and for the work that you're doing and the bravery thereof.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Chloé Bailey is a Senior Legal Advisor for Business and Human Rights at the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights. So they've filed a complaint against TotalEnergies, the French energy giant, for atrocities and killings made in Mozambique under their watch. And Total is saying, no, we're not responsible.
Look, I mean, energy companies don't have a great reputation across the continent, particularly energy companies dealing with oil exploration. Nigeria, for example, Shell has been eventually taken to court and found guilty, found wanting. So it shouldn't surprise us because they have invested heavily in these oil wells, drills, and that kind of thing. And so whatever protection they can get, they will fund, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, these are allegations. This is findings that they have made, but it'll be tested in court, and one hopes that the truth will come out.
Absolutely. 7:30 Central African Time. Let's get news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi.